There's no way that you can achieve great gains without taking great chances.
Nerdrotic.com.
Disney's had a rough year, so let's pile on a little bit. Now, that sounds cruel, you saying. Maybe so. Still, allow me to indulge in a little Disney schadenfreude. After years of anti-fan abuse and besmirching individuals' character with narratives such as Russians using bots to downvote Disney products to sow discourse in American culture. Fans criticizing Disney product is a pipeline to the alt-right. Critics of the multinational, multi-billion-dollar corporation taking their talking points from Steve Bannon. Criticizing Disney content as a fan makes you sexist, misogynist, racist, and you support white supremacy. Wow, white supremacy has never looked so diverse. Hundreds of corporate access media articles written reinforcing this narrative for years. Hit pieces written about individuals who were critical of Disney, authored by former employees of Disney with the help of current employees of Disney. Ultimately, all in defense of a bad product. My, how times have changed. It looks like Variety is taking a trip down the alt-right pipeline. Iger's big Disney reorg aims to fix problems he helped sow. In other words, my fellow paying customers / fans, you were right.
You were right. You were right about me.
Not even a full day after his surprise return to Disney, Bob Iger made his first move to reshape the House of Mouse and undo the tenure of his successor / predecessor, Bob Chapek, who was fired at an Elton John concert in the middle of the night on a Sunday. In a memo to employees last week, Iger announced that he would reorganize the corporate structure Chapek implemented in 2022, I do believe under the guidance, or at least under the supervision, of Bob Iger, who was still around, which consolidated all content budgeting and release strategy under the Disney Media and Entertainment Distribution Unit, DMED, or as we'll call it, DOA, headed by Chapek Lieutenant Kareem Daniel, whose tenure at Disney is probably coming to an end. The new restructuring seems designed to reassure Wall Street, and that's it, not the paying customer. Why in the hell would you want to reassure all the people you've been alienating over the last few years?
Is Disney late to the game, and how do you take on Netflix?
Well, we're not late to the game because the game's still going on. We're not really taking on Netflix because we're bringing Disney out.
Disney's management of streaming will change. Chapek's creation of DOA was seen as a move to accelerate and streamline the company's direct-to-consumer strategy by placing responsibility for all streaming content under a single unit.
My unit?
Investors certainly saw it that way. Well, I certainly hope Disney continues to accelerate. I want a sequel to Wakanda Forever. I want a She-Hulk season 2. I want a trilogy of the Marvels, all culminating in an all-female Avengers. Give me that A-Force. Make half the team trans for all I care. Let's do it. I want to see 8 women ordering around Black Falcon Captain America. That would be hilarious.
You've got to do better.
As a result, DOA also shouldered responsibility for Disney's massive losses on streaming. Oh, that sounds so good, doesn't it? Which more than doubled year over year from $630 million to nearly $1.5 billion in the most recent quarter. In other words, Bob Iger is blaming Bob Chapek for this one particular decision because that's what he does while they were accelerating all the woke content. While the weatherman does deserve credit for buying Disney out of irrelevance when he purchased Pixar, Marvel, and Lucasfilm, all 3 subsidiaries are worse off than they were before thanks to both of the Bobs. But let's keep in mind that Bob Iger, the coward, resigned in February of 2020. What happened around February of 2020? Oh, I remember a global pandemic, and I'm guessing he had a little more information than we did. Let's also keep in mind, despite resigning, that Bob Iger was still there during all of this decision-making as chairman. Now, as the street shifts away from the all-in on streaming mentality that dominated the last few years, Iger seems poised to give responsibility back to Disney's separate content units because he doesn't want to take responsibility for any of it, which could help convince investors that the Mouse House plans to keep its approach diversified. Diversified, if we change the definition of that word as well, I guess it now means diverse and inclusive homogenized widget. The reinstated CEO plans to implement a new structure that puts more decision-making back in the hands of our creative teams and rationalizes costs so he doesn't have to take responsibility for it. He wrote in the memo, adding, "This is a time of enormous change and challenges that Bob Iger helped bring on in our industry, and our work will also focus on creating a more efficient and cost-effective structure." In other words, a lot of you are getting laid off just like Bob Chapek said. The last part will be key to Iger's success in his second go-around at the company. It's clear that the Disney board, the very same Disney board that's been around along with Iger for most of this crap, is hoping the reinstated CEO can fix Disney's streaming strategy. But let me get this straight. The board that was around when Bob Iger helped create this original strategy of failure and then brought in Bob Chapek to create a new strategy of failure brought back the lead architect of the strategy of failure to fix the strategy.
What are you, f***ing stupid?
Which has masked a subscriber base to rival Netflix, except that's not entirely true. They've had to combine Hulu, ESPN Plus, and Disney Plus, and who knows how many they're counting from that free Verizon offer, but racked up huge losses at the same time. With Wall Street having turned on streaming and its sky-high expenses, Iger's first task will be to bring costs down as quickly as possible. There's obviously plenty of reason for the board to have confidence in Iger. I mean, why wouldn't they? The guy's really good at buying shit, failing at the first sign of trouble, and sabotaging his successor. To be fair, that's how you succeed in Hollywood, who deserves credit for building Disney into the media colossus it is today by buying a bunch of shit. But at the same time, the turbulence of Chapek's tenure and the problems caused by his restructuring have helped cloud the fact that the problems began under Iger. I knew you'd get there, Variety. Welcome to the alt-right pipeline. I'm sure you can blame climate change for all of your white supremacy. And let's not forget, while Bob Chapek, Bob Iger, and all of their ilk in Hollywood were putting all their time, energy, and money into streaming because they knew the other thing was going to get taken care of. Movie theaters bailed out by you and I. I remember it well when I was living in California. My wife, for example, couldn't go to work at her own business, but Hollywood was allowed to make pretend and focus on streaming because the theaters were going to get bailed out. Chapek's org structure was unpopular among Disney employees. Again, Bob Iger was there as chairman during these unpopular decisions, and with Iger himself, who later drove the bus ride over Chapek. Not that he's free of guilt. Many creative executives reportedly resented having decision-making power taken away from them, and insiders groused that the hierarchy slowed Disney's content pipeline. Oh my God, they were going to make more? Was there a slowing process? Has Disney put out less content over the last 2 years? And by the way, that pipeline is a sewage pipeline, complicating the greenlighting process and creating widespread confusion. Iger's feelings about the structure were clear from his internal memo, in which he wrote, "It is my intention to restructure things in a way that honors and respects creativity as the heart and soul of who we are. You're creative by remaking all of your animated movies as live-action animated movies," and announced that Kareem Daniel would be exiting the company, so he wasn't long for this world. In hindsight, aspects of Chapek's strategy were certainly misguided, but it's worth remembering that Chapek was trying to repair dysfunction caused by another reorganization implemented by Iger before the launch of Disney Plus. Good Lord, did Steve Bannon write this? Now, to be fair, it was Chapek who revised Bob Iger's modest Disney Plus subscriber projections, and Bob Iger did say it would lose billions right before he left, but Bob Chapek was still using Iger's playbook. It was Iger who engineered Disney's streaming strategy in the first place and made no secret, as I just said, of the fact that it would lead to billions of dollars in losses right before he left. And though the media industry arguably should have foreseen that Netflix's constant growth model for streaming was unsustainable, you mean the binge model is unsustainable? Say it ain't so. And that a market correction would come at some point, Chapek doesn't deserve sole blame for the industry-wide error. No, the industry does. Netflix lost subs, lost a lot of stock value, had to give money back to advertisers when the ad tier completely failed. How do you think things are going at Disney? Again, they lost $1.5 billion in a quarter just in streaming. And you know who's known this was going to happen for years? the fans, the paying customers, the people that Disney likes to call consumers. And while consumers certainly exist with Disney, it's not a compliment. This disaster was long in the making, and we can start with Kathleen Kennedy, the acclaimed producer who has been one of the most incompetent leaders in Hollywood history. Aside from engineering one of the biggest cinematic mistakes in Hollywood history, not putting Han, Luke, and Leia in a scene together, and canceling the EU and then saying there's no source material, she has a body count of fired creatives, including Josh Trank,
You're fired!
Phil Lord,
You're fired!
Chris Miller,
You're fired too!
whose movie Solo was 90% complete when she fired them. Hashtag Solo lost money, which led to the canceling of the Obi-Wan film that was supposed to be directed by Stephen Daldry, and the Boba Fett film, who was supposed to be directed by James Mangold, who took over for Josh Trank. And who could forget Dumb and Dumber, Dan and Dave from Game of Thrones and their trilogy getting scrapped. And because I'm sensing there's a theme here with Disney, Colin Trevorrow was fired from the Disney trilogy only to be replaced by the architect of that failure, Jar Jar Abrams. And I guess we'll just have to wait and see if we get films from Patty Jenkins, Damon Lindelof, Taika Waititi, and that Rian Johnson trilogy. And despite all of that, Star Wars could have survived at Disney if they hadn't fired Gina Carano, crapped out a terrible Obi-Wan show, and hired former Harvey Weinstein assistant Leslie Headland to run a show and actually put it into production. And I am completely aware I am only scratching the surface with this woman, but let's not forget Galaxy's Edge. Disney's Star Wars Galaxy's Edge attraction was originally set on Tatooine, but Kathleen Kennedy and Bob Iger changed the direction. Why?
Kathleen Kennedy, her point of view was there are way more Disney or Star Wars stories ahead of us than behind us. So we really should think about, or do we want to build a Tatooine and build what all the 50-somethings remember Star Wars is? Or do we want to build something else which is going to appeal to all the upcoming generations who are going to know the new stories? And that day, the Tatooine was killed at the studios. And all those concepts were put on a shelf, and I'm sure they're sitting in a vault, and I'm sure they're going to be shown someday about what that land would have looked like and what the attractions were going to be.
And the vast majority of this was done under the watchful eye of Bob Iger. That's okay, because Disney still had Marvel, except for Marvel Stage 4, the MCU. 17 projects over the last 2 years solely created by Disney, not counting No Way Home, that were all varying degrees of diminishing returns to failure. And Pixar has gone from a hit machine to a flop machine, and it looks like after 5 years of completely ignoring the paying customers and the fans that everyone was calling racist and sexist, it looks like the very alt-right variety is starting to figure it out. The fact is, no one has yet figured out how to organize Disney's streaming operations, I would call them disasters, and position the company for the future. No easy task, to be sure, but the board's decision to bring back Iger can't help but look a little bit desperate. You think? Like an implicit admission that no one really knows how to navigate the current media landscape. In other words, no one knows what the hell they're doing. Iger will now get a second crack at it to smoke some more woke crack, but the fact that his first attempt helped lead the company here should not be ignored. If the board's confidence in him is not misplaced exactly, it at least should be tempered with a healthy dose of skepticism. As Variety and Disney just basically admitted, they know there's something wrong, but they don't know exactly what, even though we have been telling them for years. But there are some former Hollywood execs who know what's up, including Roy Price, who used to be the head of Prime Video. The 10 biggest business issues in Hollywood. Interest rates are up. No one cares about your imaginary earnings in year 10. Investors want profits now. Shift from growth to, listen, profitability. The rapid decline of pay TV, 66% of homes now. The apparent saturation of SVOD, at least in the most lucrative markets. The still bad state of theatrical, despite Top Gun and Avatar. The growth of TikTok and YouTube. This has never been mentioned, but we are competition now, and they don't stand a chance. The revolution of Twitter, the rise of fast free streaming like Tubi and Pluto services, the apparent death of the movie star. No, it's the death of the movie star, except for Tom Cruise. What will Web3 mean for IP owners and content creators? And the birth of AI. And the biggest problem of them all that no corporate access media, mainstream media, or corporation will ever admit, Roy Price does. Let's just say it. It's a woke world experiment Top Gun, House of the Dragon, and Yellowstone defied the odds and got made, requiring huge stars for properties to do so, and became the hits of the year. They demonstrated that there is still tremendous demand, even theatrical demand, for fairly traditional but very high quality entertainment. The woke experiment has failed, and it looks like the streaming experiment has reached maturity, all resulting into a much bigger problem for Disney and for Hollywood. Theater audiences shrank by half in the last 4 years. Can movies get them back? The 2022 box office reflects more than a revenue problem. It's a butts in the seats problem, and it's about time somebody started talking about this besides us. Avatar: The Way of Water doesn't change the current reality any more than Maverick did, which is this. In the last 4 years, theatrical attendance has declined by about 50%. Add that we just had the worst domestic box office in 20 years, and if you adjust it for inflation, it's much longer than that. Let's just look at the last 3 bona fide hits. Spider-Man: No Way Home, which was partially Disney, but mostly Sony. A good film and a gimmick. Top Gun: Maverick, a great film, a COVID holdover, and a sequel to a 36-year-old movie that wasn't really reinventing the wheel, it was just rediscovering it. Avatar, a film I didn't like very much, but it's a massive hit, and Disney's gonna need 10 more of these to get out from under Iger's Fox deal. Sure, there's potential hits for 2023, including Guardians of the Galaxy 3 and Doom, but they aren't gonna match the totals of the previous 3. In other words, it's not enough, because the numbers are inflated. They're charging more money to fewer people. You just don't get around a 50% drop in ticket sales, which matches the same percentage of the fandom that Hollywood has been alienating for the last 5 years. Disney is the big dog in Hollywood and the loss leader all at the same time. A healthy company doesn't reorganize for the 3rd time in 4 years and fire their CEO in the middle of the night on a Sunday. And as I said, their big 3 IPs are worse off than they were before, and I can hear the detractors now. How can you say that? Pixar is a shadow of its former self. Marvel is in decline along with the entire superhero genre, and Star Wars has been reduced from a theatrical IP to a streaming IP. As a matter of fact, all 3 have been turned into the equivalent of direct-to-video. Particularly in the case of Star Wars and Marvel, ultimately, these are stories. Stories that we loved. Stories that we made popular, stories that we made valuable. And Bob Iger came in with Disney and bought his way into our modern mythology and turned it into the content equivalent of Soylent Green. And judging just from the latest on D+, National Treasure, and Willow, it's going to get a lot worse before it never gets better, because Disney will never learn. And one thing is absolutely clear. Disney and Bob Iger did not start Pixar. They did not start Marvel. They did not start Star Wars, but they're sure as hell going to finish it. But look on the bright side. There's always 2023.
Wish I could be.
Who is this man?
I'm her godfather.
Related.
If you help me, Batman.
And who can forget the abomination that's the Galactic Star Cruiser?
First of its kind vacation experience where you get to spend 2 days and 2 nights living out your very own Star Wars story. We have some of the best entertainment in the galaxy on board.
What the is this piece of shit?
Ugh, maybe the parks? Never mind. If you like what you heard, please like, share, and subscribe. If you didn't like what you heard, I thank you for listening this long. I will see you in the next video.
Nerdrotic.com.